Panel. We are back after a week away, so very much looking forward to getting into all of the discussions for today. But first off, a hello goes out to Jumeira, who's in the hot seat, taking the place of Jason, who's away on his annual vacation. Jumeira, your first education panel, are you looking forward to it?
Absolutely. I want to see if exams are still as important as they were when I was in school, to see if, we give that much emphasis, the same amount of emphasis as we used to.
I remember when I was 15, 16, those GCSE results, if you didn't get what you wanted, it was the end of the world. So it'd be very interesting to speak to our panelists about, is that still the case? Do these still matter to teachers? Do these still matter to the students? You're right. So that's definitely one of the topics we're going to be looking at today. Also looking at teacher burnout, teacher stress, looking at teacher turnover today. I know that we've got two principals in the studio today, so very much looking forward to getting their views on that topic. But first off, let's introduce the panelists who are joining us live in the Dubai studio. Again, if you have any questions for the panelists, let us know. You can send through any questions to our SMS number, which is 4001. Join in the discussion, please. First off, Christopher Ginjal, who's manager at Carfax Private Tutors. Hello to you, Christopher. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, it's good to be back.
It is good to have you back. And Christopher, you've sent us a couple of very interesting articles that hopefully we're going to have time to touch upon today on the education panel. The Eton headmaster, Tony Little, he's done it again. He's opened his mouth.
Absolutely. Nice controversial words coming out, but it's quite easy to pontificate from where he sits in charge of Eton. But he's got some interesting views on education. It's worth talking about them.
He does. He certainly does. So we'll be talking about that a little bit later on in the show. Also, a big hello and welcome back goes out to Lynn Sapelsa from whichschooladvisor.com. Hello to you, Lynn.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Lynn, let's just quickly get into exam results and just a quick recap of what happened not last week but the week before with regards to what was discussed on air and what was talked about with regards to exam results.
Okay, so certainly for the vast majority of students following the UK curriculum here in the UAE and also elsewhere in the world, the key date for those who've left school now, year 13, is going to be the 14th of August when their A-level results come out. And for the vast majority, those are the results that matter in terms of their options as regards their university places or other further educational thoughts that they may be having. So much of our discussion 2 weeks ago was around what to do when those results arrive. If you do well, what's the next step in the process? If you do better than expected, what's the next step? What are the options that potentially are out there? And then the area that we touched on to some degree, but not as much as we had wanted to, was what to do if those results are not quite what you were expecting.
Okay.
So I think that's going to be an important part of the discussion today.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you there, Lynn. Introduce our next guest, who joins us from the parenting panel, Mike Embley, Executive Principal at the Nord Anglia International School, Dubai. Mike, we called it the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I do believe we're moving into the ugly.
We did indeed, and just, not that this refers to Bruce sitting next to me, I was just looking up what the collective noun for a group of school principals might be. It turns out that there isn't one, so I'm going to suggest a pomposity or something like that, but we're certainly not the ugly. Bruce is a very handsome chap. The good was if you exceeded expectations, the bad was if you fell some way short of your expectations. And then the ugly was if you received results that were perhaps better or just different. So you expected to do well in science and not so well in art, and you in fact did the reverse. What should you do then? Should you reconsider your university entry? Should you reconsider your career path? Should you perhaps retake, or should you change at all? Now, some of these choices might be made for you. If you needed an A or a 7 in maths and you didn't get it, you might not be able to go to Imperial College to do mechanical engineering. If you got a C or a 4 in art, you may well not be able to go to St Martin's to study fine art. But often with unexpected results, a whole new vista opens up before you that you weren't even considering, and that can be quite a stressful time because you've got a relatively short time to readjust your life plan.
Okay, we're going to be getting into that discussion in a couple of minutes' time. But first, to introduce our last guest, but certainly not least, he is brand new to Dubai, so we have to give him a big Dubai welcome. 2 days here, I believe, Dr. Bruce Robinson, who is the new principal at the Jumeira Baccalaureate School. Welcome to you, Bruce. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for the welcome. It's great to be here.
2 days, so you are brand new to Dubai. It'd be great to know about your background and where you've just come from.
I'm an Australian, as you can probably tell from my accent, but I've been in international schools now for about 14 years. 8 years in India, 4 years in the United States, and my most recent appointment was in Vietnam. Almost all of my schools have had both British curriculum and IB, so I come with a background in international education.
Bruce, coming from a Vietnamese school must be absolutely fascinating. It'd be really interesting to get your insights into how schools in Vietnam deal with exam results. And for instance, you said you've been 8 years in India as well, how schools in India deal with exam results as well. I can imagine that there are huge cultural differences.
Very much so. In India, there's, I'm sure you all realise, there's a very strong examination culture. And there's a lot of tuition that takes place to help students prepare for exams. Sometimes the tuition is very successful and helpful. Other times I think it's a detriment to the students' results. But it's part of the culture and it's accepted and widely used. Vietnam, very different. I think there's not as much emphasis on examinations, more emphasis on, I think, holistic education, especially in the international schools. And there's been a remarkable growth in international schools in Vietnam over the last 10 years. There's really only 2 or 3 before that time, but now it has grown rapidly.
Now, I know that we do focus very much on GCSEs and A-level results with regards to exam results, but it'd be also interesting because you said with your background dealing with the IB system as well. With regards to exam results in the IB system, we mentioned just before the good, the bad and the ugly. When you don't get those results you want, from your point of view, Bruce, how do you deal with that? How do you help coach those students?
I think you have to coach them in preparing for the examinations and sitting the examinations, but you also have to have the mechanism in place to support and care for them afterwards. And sometimes this is difficult because they've returned to their homes over the summer and they often get their results when they're not at school. So I think we need to have an online presence where we can assist students to look at their results, determine what was successful, what may not have been as successful, and then support them in any way we can. So I think it's important for schools to have that process in place.
Let's talk about that online presence, because I remember getting my A-level results being 18 years old, being, I think, on a remote Welsh island and getting a phone call and not quite getting the results I wanted and being absolutely heartbroken. But like you said, having that online presence might help students. It'd be interesting to know, Lynn and Mike and Christopher, what are your feelings on this? How to help students when things become ugly, when you don't get those results that you wanted?
I think schools are very good at, or getting better at this, certainly, at getting on top of the situation. One of the problems if you're doing the British system at 18 is if you don't get your grades for either your firm or your backup option, that you're faced with a very swift choice that you have to make. Do you want to go into clearing, which would be if you miss your grades, or if you do very well, do you want to go into a process called adjustment and try and apply to a different university? Now that, if you go through clearing, it's very much first come, first serve. If you go through adjustment, you still have 5 days, which is not that much time. And if you are away from the school, away from the people who've helped you make those decisions, it can be very difficult for pupils.
Lynn, what about in your experience? Because I know you've got 2 children. Is one of the children in university right now?
Both of them, actually. Two out of 3 are at university.
So what happened when they got their exam results?
Well, I guess our situation was slightly different because both of my children are at university in Australia, so we didn't go through the UCAS process. And the big advantage, obviously, for them too was that the results come out in August. But in actual fact, they don't start university in Australia until February, and they don't even start to apply until after the results have come out, by and large. So at least we knew where we were. But in terms of planning around what they wanted to do, both of them had a reasonable idea of what they wanted to study and which universities they wanted to study, and they knew what grades they needed to achieve. Unfortunately, in my son's case, he got the course that he wanted, he started it, and then I think in common with probably a lot of 18-year-olds who really don't quite know what they want to do, did 12 months and decided actually he'd made a huge mistake. And we talked a little bit about this a fortnight ago as well, in terms of, sometimes what you think you want and what the path you start down isn't necessarily the one that you should be on, and there are ways of changing that. So he actually switched courses at the end of 12 months and then subsequently finished his bachelor's degree and is now at the last semester of his master's in Melbourne. My daughter probably was even more complicated than him in some ways, in that she was a very bright student who did exceptionally well, but had an absolute passion for theatre and thought that was the route she wanted to go down. Again, did 1.5 semesters and decided that really wasn't intellectual enough for her, and also at the end of the 12 months switched, but fortunately was able to take credits from the first to the second course, so she's not doing additional time, and is now going to finish again in November and go into hopefully a master's in education. That's where she wants to go. So I guess the lesson is, sometimes even starting down the path when you've achieved everything you thought you wanted, you've got the grades you thought you wanted and needed, you're doing the course you think you want to do, still, there may be at some point further down the track a need to revisit your options and your direction overall.
Thank you, Lynn. We're also going to talk to Mike Embley as well, Executive Principal at the North Anglia International School, Dubai, after the break with regards to exam results, what to do if perhaps you don't get those results you want, and also how to cope with that. But we'll be back after this break here on Dubai Eye 103.8.
More of the word.
Mike Embley, Executive Principal at the North Anglia International School, Dubai, Lynn Supelsa from WhичSchoolAdvisor.com, and Dr. Bruce Robinson, who's the new principal at the Jumeira Baccalaureate School, brand new principal, has only been in Dubai for the last 2 days, so we've been giving him lots of tips and advice, and hopefully not scaring you too much, Bruce. I hope we've not anyway.
Not at all.
Okay, brilliant. But turning back to Mike Embley, now this is an interesting point Bruce brought up just before the break, talking about how to cope with students who perhaps didn't get the exam results that they wanted. And Bruce mentioned schools maybe having more of an online presence to help those students through this potentially quite difficult time. I'd love to know your thoughts, Mike.
I think an online system combined with either, if students are travelling, telephone or face-to-face, because sometimes online is excellent for fact-finding, absolutely, totally agree with Bruce there, where a student has either worked themselves up into a bit of a tiz or needs an involved conversation and guidance from somebody who's experienced. I think a university guidance officer, counsellor, careers officer, whatever you want to call them, who is experienced and knows the US system, the UK, the Australian, the European systems, who knows A-level and IB or even Scottish Highers, preferably all of them. And such people are worth their weight in gold because they know what to do. And generally with the upper six, the year 13s, the final year students, the second year IB, second year A-level, second year Highers, they will know those students and will have gone through the journey with them, or they should have done. And having a conversation with that person is the best possible thing to do, be it good, bad or ugly, because you get impassionate but informed advice. And often parents are very involved, or the student is just lost in a, what do I do now? I've done great, I've done badly, I've done differently. Have a conversation with somebody who is professional and really knows what they're talking about.
If you're listening to the show right now and perhaps you or your daughter or your son has gone through this system, perhaps they didn't get the results they wanted, please join in the discussion. Let us know your story. 4001 is SMS number. We'd love to hear from you today. But there was an article, I think a couple of days ago in the Telegraph, which is a national newspaper in the UK, and the headline was "Top Headmistress, GCSE results, no one will care in 5 years. Girls," so she's actually targeting girls, "must learn not to fret over exams." Just to give you some context, this is a lady called Judith Carlisle, who's the head of a top girls' school in the UK. She says, "Exam results will not matter once pupils leave school. They don't need to aim for 100%. And the article actually goes on to say her school implements online exams which make it absolutely impossible to get 100%. They do that deliberately. I'd love to know the panelists' views on this. Judith Carlisle saying GCSE results, no one's going to care in 5 years. Girls must learn not to fret over exams. Christopher, going to turn to you first on this one.
There was a second half to this, the quote or the conversation that they had, and it was picked up very differently from different newspapers in the UK. The second half basically stressed the importance of social skills, and particularly how pupils can network with each other, with their elders, with their peers around them. And it's not just the value of educational qualifications anymore. It's how you are able to interact into getting into a job, into the workplace, at university, and in life. And I think this is more the key underlying point that she was trying to get at. I disagree pretty strongly with the comment that you shouldn't be aiming for 100% in an exam. I think you should. I don't think you should be doing an exam if you're not going to try well in it.
Yeah.
But I do like the importance that she has stressed on this and on the social skills aspect. And I think it is quite important that we don't try and raise drones in the classroom that are all aiming for 100%, and that's it.
Okay, so let's stay on social skills. Now, I think she targeted girls quite simply because she is the head of a top girls' school, so that's why she's saying girls must learn not to fret over exams. But going back to that point you made about social skills, Bruce, social skills, are they important? Are they just as important as exam results?
I think they are, and it's not only girls who fret over exams. I think boys fret just as much. But I think sometimes it depends on the culture and the climate within the school, how much pressure is placed on the students as they prepare for the exams. I think if we can assure students that exam success is one factor, but creativity and problem solving and being a sociable, supportive, contributing citizen, they're just as important as those exam results. But I really do want to stress the issue that boys do suffer just as much as girls in this, and I think that's something that's often forgotten.
So there's no need to aim for 100%. Mike, do you share the views of Christopher saying you should be aiming for 100%?
Too right. I mean, really...
Yeah, you have to aim for the top.
Yeah, you've got to aim for it, and I like a little bit of pressure on students, as I often say, you know, in year one, we'll hold your hand. By year 11 and year 12, 13, our thumb will be on your head a little bit. Because you do... I disagree with these... I work with several of these principles, as no doubt Christopher does. But when you're in a highly selective school, like the chap Tony Little from Eton saying exam results aren't important, well, you're going to get those results anyway. So it's very easy to sit there and say they're not important. Well, of course they are. It's a headline-raising thing to say. Of course exam results are important because they are the gateway to the next stage of your life. And you can either be saying, welcome to the physics lecture, or would you like fries with that? And I know which way I'd like my children to be going. Now, of course, there's a lot more to life. And I totally agree with Christopher, as I've said before. I don't want to bring up drones either personally or professionally, but exams are a gateway, and it's a simple fact of life.
Lynn?
I was just going to go back to your opening comments, actually, about the Eton headmaster and the comments he had made, because I think what I took out of his comments, which I thought actually was very relevant, was that he was saying that the education system was failing to prepare children for adulthood, being based on an approach to exams that had changed little since Victorian times, and which obliges students to sit alone at their desks in preparation for a world in which for much of the time they will need to work collaboratively. And I think that's a fundamental, that they have, that yes, they need to be independent, but they have to be able to work together in the modern workplace.
But that's true, Lynn, but I'm going to disagree with him again, because it hasn't changed much since Plato. And a few months ago we had that point, didn't we? We read out that quote: "The youth of today are rude and ignorant and know nothing of their peers and are poorly educated and claim and know little of the classics." That wasn't David Cameron or Gove, that was Aristotle. So people have been complaining about the education system since before there was an education system. And children have gone through it and grown up and been able to socialise. Victorians could socialise. Of course we should teach that, but I don't think that's a reason to denigrate academia.
Christopher, just one last point before we cross over to the New Centre.
No, I agree with both points here. I think for Tony Little to come out and say these things as head of Eton is very easy. He is sitting on top of the pile with a bunch of pupils each year who will come out, get great grades and go on to great universities.
And he's retiring.
And he's retiring, so whatever he says now doesn't really matter. This is a thinly veiled criticism at the changes going on in the UK education system. We're moving towards more exams at the end of a curricula and less coursework. He's against this, clearly, but I think his comments about how to integrate social learning together are very valid and things that I would like to see improved and impressed upon the curriculum here.
Okay, we are crossing over to the ARN News Centre for the 1:30 news. We'll be back with the education panel in a few minutes. If you'd like to join in the discussion, you are more than welcome to send any comments need to do to deal with students who already know that they maybe don't want to go to university. They know that they're not academic. What can we do with those students?
Well, I think schools need to identify those students early in their secondary careers so that a pathway can be put in place that will help them achieve. It might be that they're not achieving well in the examination level, but they can perhaps take a more vocational or career-oriented approach to schools. I know that there are BTEC courses. There's a new IB career certificate, which is a little less rigorous than the IB diploma. So there are various ways that schools can do this, but I'm just concerned that we must not leave those people out of the equation. We all agree that excellence in academics is what we all go to achieve, but we must provide programs for those students with learning difficulties, for those students where language is an issue, that English is not their first language, and that will also factor in onto their exam results. So schools need to be very careful about identifying early and then putting programs in that support individual needs.
Let's look at this from a practical point of view. You've worked in schools in Vietnam and India, for instance. How did you implement programs to help students who are not particularly academic at those schools?
We employed specialists, learning support specialists in all areas to support those students. We employed English as an additional language specialist as well. You just have to do this these days, and I think most international schools worldwide have very strong programs to support students in this regard. It was the same in Vietnam, but the contexts are different. In Vietnam, there were many Korean students and very many Vietnamese students in my school. At that school, EAL was the biggest factor in the school. 92% of the school did not have English as their first language. So
wow.
We had a whole team of people supporting them in that regard.
Mike, what are your feelings on this? How do you deal with students who aren't particularly academic and you know are never going to be academic? It is quite a difficult one.
I'm going to argue, and I'm sorry. I wouldn't let them think that because I think that everybody can be good at something. Now, I'm not living in cloud cuckoo land. Not everybody is going to come away with all sevens or all A's all of the time. But I do feel very strongly that if you put a label on somebody, or you tell them, or even let them think that, oh, you're not very good, don't worry, don't try, or you're only in set 3, or or here's the homework for the easy group, or something like that, then that is where they will work too. Now, some people will require significant effort to achieve what others achieve relatively easily, but then the duty of the school, I would say, is to help them to get there where possible. Now, I speak as somebody who's got quite markedly different academic grades. My science and maths grades are quite different from my failing my French GCSE, I'm ashamed to say. O-level, actually, I'm old enough to have done O-levels. French O-level, failed it, absolutely useless. But I was, A, not inclined to do it, but B, I was sat at the back. I was the kid who couldn't do French, and I was allowed to do nothing. So what I would say is a school has a duty not to allow the pupil to do nothing, to get them to achieve the best that they can achieve, whatever that may be, and to do it honestly. Certainly don't throw a student into a course like IB Diploma that they can't do based on their GCSE grades, just to take their money.
Okay, Bruce.
I believe we must have high expectations of our students regardless of what their academic ability is. And so I agree wholeheartedly with what Mike said. That we just need to not label them, but we need to have high expectations of whatever academic level they are achieving, because often a student who might be a very low achiever, the value added from their education of what they've gained 5 years is much higher than a student who was always near the top.
Should Bruce explain value added, because it's a technical insider
yes.
term, and I know he knows
good
what
points,
it means.
Good points.
What we're talking about with value added is a student, for example, may join in year 8, and you assess them at what their levels are at that time, and you monitor their progress and you collect data, and 3 years down the track you can see the improvement they have made from what level they were achieving at the beginning to the level they've made in 3 years' time. Now that may be significantly higher in the learning curve than a student who was in year 11 just focusing on their A-levels or IB. So the value added can often be much higher for students who have a challenging issue to face with their education.
Value added refers to against an average school. Yeah. So how well as, if you, in an average school, they'd improve by, let's say, 20%, if in your school they improved by 35%, you've added 10% of value.
Christopher and Lynn, just to include you in this conversation, looking at students perhaps not from the most academic backgrounds, how do you feel about this discussion?
I think that it really needs to be a localised solution to quite a large-scale problem. Like, the teachers are going to be on the front line of this, and they have to, as we've said before, identify these pupils beforehand. But they also need to understand how the pupils work themselves. Thinking back to my own education, I took far more encouragement from getting a D than I did from an A. I used to work a lot harder when someone told me that there was a problem, rather than when someone told me, oh, you're doing okay. It's just the way that I worked. And other people might need constant feedback and respond really well to praise. Whereas it depends from pupil to pupil. Leaving them alone is not an answer here. Yeah. You can't leave them to their own devices. They need to be supervised. Similarly, saying the wrong thing to them is just as harmful, in my opinion anyway. So you need to be fairly aware of who you're dealing with as much as what they're trying to achieve.
Lynn, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, totally agree. And again, sort of from personal experience, I have 3 children, one of whom is very academic, but needs that praise and to be told that she's doing well to continue at that level, and can be enormously disappointed if for some reason she doesn't do quite as well as she expected. Whereas the other 2 are constantly having to be reminded, particularly at the moment with my youngest one who's here, and who is being constantly reminded about the geography revision she's supposed to be doing and the biology revision she's supposed to be doing at the moment. So, but again, for her, we know that she needs to put that bit more effort in, basically, to get to where she wants to be, and she needs the support to be able to do it too. She can't do it on her own.
Okay, stay with us. This is the Education Panel on Dubai Eye 103.8. We'll be back in a few minutes.
The Word. Everyone's talking about it. Weekdays from midday.
Moving into a slightly different topic now here on Dubai Eye 103.8. It is still the Education Panel. However, right now, moving into something that I know, Jumeira, quite a big problem when it comes to teachers. Looking on the other side of the coin, we've been really focusing on students and students' welfare, but sometimes it's good to give time to the teachers as well. We were talking off air about teacher turnover, and some of the stats are quite shocking.
Yes, I was just reading an article earlier today, which is quite shocking. It's come from the U.S. It's basically estimating that the turnover rate among teachers in the U.S. is now 20% this year versus 9% in 2009, which is a huge difference. So we need to really ask the question of why has this rate gone up? What is the root cause of this? Is it the fact that many teachers who become, many professionals who do become teachers are going into the career for the right reasons? So I wanted to pose this question to the panel today. What is, in your experience, the root cause of teacher stress today, and what can we do about it?
Okay, we're actually going to cross over to Dr. Bruce Robinson, who's a new principal at Jumeira Baccalaureate School, first on this, because you are a new voice to the panel. All of those questions Jumana's brought up are incredibly valid, but what are your opinions on them?
Teacher stress has definitely increased, in my opinion, over the last 15 to 20 years. I think one of the reasons behind that is that the demands placed on teachers are now much more extensive than they were in that time. Parents and school boards and the various directors and governors of organisations place a lot of emphasis now on expectation of what the teachers are to do. And I think teachers suffer because of that. I think what schools are doing these days is trying to support teachers more by making the climate within the school more conducive to open and collaboration. I think one of the best ways to ease teacher stress is to have a peer working with a teacher, to be a confidant and a mentor to help them through issues, especially if they're newly appointed to the school. Induction programs are very, very important. Orientation programs are very important, but just don't leave it there. Once that induction process is over, there has to be a support network in place. And that's where the heads of schools and senior leadership teams are very important to monitor how a teacher is coping, not only with the stresses of teaching, but moving into a new environment.
Exactly.
If they're a first-time expatriate teacher, they've got to cope with those issues as well as teaching the students in their classes.
Now, Bruce, just going on your points, it'd be interesting to get Mike's point of view, because, Mike, you said off air, one of the jobs as principals is to protect your teachers, to look after the welfare of your teachers. So it'd be interesting to, going on the back of what Bruce just said, your views on protecting those teachers, managing teacher stress.
Well, Bruce has got to say the nice, intelligent part of the conversation, so I'm going to be a little bit direct. One of the principal causes of teacher stress is rude and sometimes really rude, ignorant parents. And there are a number of issues here. Number one, everybody loves their children. You are deeply, deeply engaged in their education, we would hope. So everybody's child is special. Number two, teachers in the main, certainly the good ones, are really passionate about their job, so they really care about it. So a quick email that's fired off from your side might spoil the teacher's whole day, and that affects how well they are doing the job for your child. So just a little bit of politeness and a little bit of care and a little bit of thought for the reality of a teacher's job. So I'm going to bring up an amalgam example. You will find my child's gloves now. They have lost them in your class. I expect them returned. Well, have you looked for them? 5-year-olds lose gloves. Teenagers leave gloves at their parents' house. You've sent what is perhaps a quickly fired off email that will upset that 25, 26-year-old teacher for the rest of their day. They will perhaps spend their entire lunchtime looking for these gloves. One of the jobs of the principal is to bring those parents in and say, actually, do you know what you've done? Have you looked for the gloves? Children do lose gloves. And another one that really irritates me, parking, dangerous driving outside school.
We've all seen it.
We have seen it, and I'm sorry, it's unacceptable and it's wrong. And those parents must be told directly, and if necessary, banned from school. Because I've seen teachers looking utterly horrified and upset by some foolish person tearing through a school car park with 3-year-olds scattering in front of them because they have the right to go wherever they want in their big car. So I think a large part of a principal's job is to set a supportive culture, as Bruce very correctly points out, and be available to your teachers, but remove the extraneous issues from them so that they can do the job that they're passionate about. If there is some parent who is howling and screaming because we have lost one of their socks in a swimming lesson, well, socks get lost. You know, come and howl and scream at me because that's part of my job. But let that teacher do the marking, do the assessment, do the planning for the next day's lesson.
I want to bring Christopher into the conversation, looking at teacher turnover. Jumana just read out some pretty shocking statistics when it comes to the United States. And we were talking during the break, Christopher, about, you know, I said teaching is a vocation. You get into teaching because you are truly passionate about it. But is that trend still the case when it comes to young people entering the teaching profession?
There are certainly, certainly among my peers who graduated from university around the same time as me, there were certainly some who, when they came into university and for a long time before that, had said, I want to be a teacher. This is what I feel passionately about. I've made arrangements for this in postgraduate study. This is what I'm going to do. That said, there were also some around the second or third year who thought, I'm doing let's say a biology degree, a chemistry degree, a history degree, a geography degree. What do I come out and do with this? And there were certainly some who fell out of university and thought teaching is a safe career option. It's a career for life. There are good perks to it. It is a rewarding job. The people who go into teaching and do well at it have great job satisfaction and love it. And that is an attractive proposition to people. But it is not an easy job. And I think that some of them, I don't know personal examples of people who have fallen out of the profession, but when you read stories about it, you do see that for the reasons that Mike was saying, teacher burnout, teacher stress, people do come to the realization after 2 years or more that is this really what they want to be doing?
How do you manage this teacher stress, the burnout, the turnovers? Because as principals, and I'm turning to Bruce and Mike on this one, surely not only are you there to protect the welfare of the teachers, but you're also to make sure that they're happy, that they're going to stay in their jobs for longer, because I'm assuming the longer the teachers are there, the more consistent it is with the students. It's almost like a cycle that everything works together in that relationship.
Well, I'll talk practicalities and then Bruce can expound and do the intelligent part better at it than me. You give them good pay, good training, and you treat them as proper professionals. Just those three simple things, and that in and of itself is relatively rare. So Bruce can now talk about school culture.
Well, in very simple terms, Mike's correct. That's what teachers need. They need to feel that they are supported in everything they do. A primary teacher or a specialist or a secondary teacher, they need to know that the senior leadership team and the head of the school is there to assist in their development. Because in assist teacher development,